Should I introduce you? We're ready to go, you think?
We're ready.
Okay. All right, so I believe it's the second to last brown bag of the quarter where we have Debbie Olson from mathematics here to talk about her experience with her SPAC. Okay, turn over to you.
Okay, so I titled this the most concise, awesome title ever. But you'll appreciate it. The Nonlinear Adventure through the worlds of professional lead, nonprofit organizations, and grant funding. And the reason I chose this picture is not just because it's beautiful, although it's beautiful, but because this is kind of how I felt the last 2 years. Kind of equal parts exhilarated and terrified, and maybe just slightly more terrified than exhilarated most of the time. And out of my comfort zone, completely out of my comfort zone. So this picture captured that pretty well for me. Let's see if I can get this going. No, it's not going to like it. I might just have to do it by hand. So this particular story began for me in the summer of 2009 when I attended my first course with a group called the Mathematics Education Collaborative, or MEC for short. And the way I found out about this course was when I first started at the Falls in 2005, one of the first groups that it was recommended I become a part of was a group called WATOTM, Washington Association of Teachers of Mathematics, another super tidy little name. But it's a really great group of teacher educators around the state that get together. And at one of those meetings early on, Ginger Warfield from the University of Washington was raving about the work of this group. And there was an opportunity to become involved with them because they were doing an NSF grant. They were working with teachers in the Bellingham area, K-12 teachers, and the NSF grant required that they had content experts from higher ed be a part of the project, which they hadn't done before. And we're nervous about because there are some challenges in differentiating instruction between K-12 teachers and higher ed, and there are some status issues that come into play, just like they do in our own classrooms. So there was some concern that bringing higher ed people in might spoil it a little bit, frankly. But I couldn't go. That first year, these were 9-day courses, so it would be 2 weeks out of my summer. I had little kids at the time, so I just tucked it away. And then the next year, or 1 or 2 years later, Ruth Parker, who's the CEO of MEC and co-founder of this organization, came to that particular meeting. And she did work with us and talked about the project they were doing. And then I was sold. Like, I was interested before, but then once I met her and really got a sense of what was happening, I was really sold on the work, or I just wanted to try it. It sounded exciting. And so she scholarshiped me in, is that a verb? Into the class the next summer. And she let me stay at her house so that I didn't have to pay any hotel fees. So that was the beginning of what I consider, I think she does too, a really great friendship and mentorship. She's just become one of the greatest mentors for me as a teacher since that time. And the course, so the work of MEC is really set up around giving teachers the opportunities to be learners of content and pedagogy. So not only talking about good practice, which is very important, but experiencing it as learners. And one of the beliefs of this group that I share, having experienced it, is that it's really difficult to teach in a way that you have never learned. So we can try it, we mess around with it, but at our core, we still tend to teach in ways that we learned and that we felt were as effective as anything else for us. So part of their work is really giving teachers different, deep learning experiences that reflect current research in education. And by current, I mean within the last 30 years. I'm not talking even just like little breaking edge stuff, which is also fantastic, but this huge body of knowledge that we have about how we learn, and specifically about how we learn mathematics. Oh, I forgot this. So my experience there is, in some sense, in this course, I felt like the rug got pulled up out from under me a little bit as a teacher, because what I was experiencing sitting in this classroom of teachers, so our content was patterns 1, so it was basically like the basis of algebra, looking at patterns and generalizing patterns and communicating what we were seeing. And what I was experiencing was so different from what I was accustomed to, even in kind of my more innovative stages. And it was very challenging because it really called into question some of my own practices that I felt, pretty good about. There were challenges in the fact that we had K-14 in the room. Ruth was very careful when we came to say, there's a letter she sent out to us that said, you will have status in this group whether you want it or not. It was much nicer than that, but that was basically the message. And it was just an ask of us to be cautious in terms of how and what we shared while we were all working together, because other teachers would likely give us, we had a tendency, we could easily shut people down because the college person is talking about math, so this must be the right way to do it. And I know that many of us would roll our eyes and say that's silly, but it really does happen. And it happens with our students too, for reasons that are unearned and for lots of different reasons. So I went in with that frame, but I got so excited about the math that I was learning in ways I had never seen it. And I was learning it in these ways by working with elementary school teachers who didn't have my basket of algebraic techniques and that type of experience, but they had their experience of trying to help kids understand mathematics and lay a foundation, and they brought these beautiful things to life that I had never seen or experienced before. So I was really excited, but I had to keep keeping myself in check. Because I would still take over with my excitement, and that could shut people down. So there was like this challenge, but it was beautiful because I learned so much more by being in this workshop with this wide range of teachers than I would if it had been a more limited range. And we see that in these workshops all the time. This was something that was really difficult for me to come to grips with. I was really frustrated during some days in this class, like almost to the point of tears. And I couldn't figure out what, it was embarrassing because, it's just a group of adults, all these teachers learning math together. And I was so frustrated. I really had to leave the room once because I was tearing up. And it took me a few days to realize it, but I realized that I was seeking her validation as the teacher. I was so excited to be there and be doing this in a new way to me and in a way that was exciting for me to think about bringing back to my students. But in that, I wanted to be told I was doing a really good job because I felt vulnerable. And she wouldn't do it. She wouldn't tell me how great I was. And that had always been my experience in math class. That's probably a part of why I'm here, is I was always told, you're really good at this, that's really great, you know what you're doing. And I am embarrassed by how desperately I wanted her to tell me that, but I did. Instead, I would work on something that was really I would take it in a direction. One of the, to try to give you a sense of what this classroom feels like, we would always start with a really challenging question that got us right out of the gate realizing none of us knows as much as we think we do. So something that we thought we understood really well, and as soon as we started digging into it, we realized, oh my gosh, there's so much more going on here than I realized. All of the workshops attempt to start with something like that. And then there are tasks. There are all different types of tasks. There are tasks that we do together as a class, as a whole group. There are tasks that we do in smaller groups, very carefully chosen. Not all group tasks are great group tasks. Some of them are not worthy of a group's attention. And then there are these tasks that in this work we call menu tasks, which grew out of the work of Marilyn Burns, who's another incredible math educator. And menu, the idea behind menu is that you surround the students with the content of the unit. And the menu tasks really help to do that literally and figuratively. So they hang around the room. And they also have to be carefully chosen in terms of being kind of the right type of task. They have to be what Joe Bowler would call low floor, high ceiling tasks. So accessible, but not really a limit on where they can go. Those make great menu tasks. And during menu time, you have the freedom as a student to work individually, to work with somebody else, to choose which task you're going to work on and when. And then periodically throughout the unit, she would say, for instance, after lunch, we're going to process this task. So make sure if you haven't spent time on that one yet, you do, so you can participate in that conversation. Lots of things like that. So there were very intentional ways to draw big ideas out, but we were very rarely marching through content in exactly the same place all the time. And that was magical to me because my experience in math class was one of two things. Either, it's going a little fast and I'm just taking notes and hoping to catch up when I get home. That was most of grad school. And then the rest of the pre-grad school stuff was more me kind of biting my tongue because I felt pretty good about what was going on and I knew the teacher was tired of hearing me answer questions. And that's not to be braggy, that was just the type of class that was a more typical class. This was so different. So I knew during small group time, I needed to sit back and bite my tongue a lot because I love my own ideas. I really love them. And I think they're better than anyone else's. And so I would want to really take over. And it took me a couple times and a couple gentle reminders to learn that when I sat back, I learned so much more from teachers, especially in the lower grades. And I needed to listen to that. But I couldn't do that all the time because I also was really excited about the math I was learning. And then you gave me that chance to say, okay, I can handle sitting back during this because I know in 20 minutes I get to just dig into this thing that I'm interested in and take it as far as I want, and I don't need to apologize to anybody or pretend like I don't know something I know. And it was just this magical balance. So once I got past, that probably took a couple years actually to get past seeking validation.
It's hard.
Yeah, I still struggle with it, honestly, and we work quite closely together, and I still find myself, but aren't I doing a great job? The course gave me a jolt of energy for what could be in my classes. Just having that experience as a learner, I left desperately wanting to create that for my students to have that experience, because I knew I wasn't giving it to them. And I think I was a good teacher, and I did a lot of great things, and I still do. But this gave me a vision of something else that I'd been looking for. So I had read quite a bit of research, not all of it by any means, and probably only little pieces that I found interesting, but enough to know that there were things out there that I was struggling to make a part of my classroom. So things like student thinking really guiding the class more than just what I think should happen next. Me stepping back as the haver of knowledge and letting students take that up. We call it agency. That's the key now, right? Is students picking up the agency in the classroom rather than us dragging them through. And I had never experienced all that stuff. I'd read about it, and I tried 1,000 different things. Some I felt good about, some I felt horrible about. But in this room, I suddenly felt like, oh, this is what it could look like. And I just was blown away by that. And pretty scared.
Is it okay to ask a question?
Yeah, please.
So
No questions.
On this seeking validation part, is that
Yeah.
different than wanting someone to tell you you have the right answer?
For me, it was,
Okay.
because I felt pretty sure of my answers. Not always.
Okay.
This was just, I wanted her to tell me I was really great.
And
Yeah.
is that bad? I mean, or is there, it
Well-
sounds like you're saying that's not.
It wasn't healthy for me. I wasn't doing it for the right reasons. She gave me validation. It just wasn't the stuff I wanted. So, like, I would work on something and I'd want to show her, like a little kid. Mom, look at me, look at me. And Ruth would come over and say, okay, tell me what you're trying to figure out. Tell me what you saw. Okay. So what are you thinking about now? What are you wondering about now? And I was like, no. I just want you to tell me I won the race, And that just wasn't what it wasn't about. And in the end, what was so exciting, and one of the reflections I wrote is, by the end of the class, I was really seeking out my own celebrations rather than, and I had never done that before in math. That's embarrassing. But I was, I don't know. Maybe I'm just a shallow person, but that's where I was at the time. And again, this is kind of the same thing. I felt like I finally had a complete picture of what the classroom could be. Instead of, we've all collected, and some much more effectively than I did, lots of cool little things we could do in class. I struggled to make them all fit. I felt like when I put one in, I lost ground somewhere else. And I'd have one goal, and then something else would kind of fall off the side. And I felt like I was trying to hang things on a frame that wasn't made for the things I was trying to hang or something. And this, I felt like, I could back up and have a vision of how all of these things could fit together. And more holistic, I felt like I had a sense of that love of math that most of us have, I think, in some sense. And it felt like it was in the classroom, which in my experience, it didn't always feel like it was in the classroom. Like I was trying to shove it in there or drag people out so they could see it. But this felt like it was, like we were all kind of in there together. Now, Ruth's masterful at this, so she makes it look easy, and I learned that the hard way too. When I came back from this, I suddenly felt like I had a vision of my discipline as kind of this big, beautiful thing that could be taught as a big, beautiful thing, and that I could relate to other disciplines better. So, we'd sit in committee meetings with folks in English or folks in social sciences, and they would talk about projects their students were doing or portfolios or kind of these kind of big ways of thinking of content. And I always felt I struggled to access those conversations because while I felt I could see my discipline that way, the stuff I was doing in class didn't lend itself to that, or I couldn't figure out a way to make it lend itself. And suddenly I felt like, oh my gosh, if I was doing this kind of stuff, yes, we could do that. We could have a menu task. We could make sure we process that one. We do portfolios as a part of this work. It just suddenly felt more flexible and authentic to me. So I was just kind of uber excited, sort of like a new convert, my poor department. So then now what? So I had this great experience, and it really was kind of earth-shattering, and that's not always a good thing. So I came back to the department and said, I went to this thing, it's awesome, but I want somebody else to go because I want to try to put this stuff to work, and there's no way I can do it alone. And at the time, Terry Serrata was here, who's now in Montana, and he went the next summer, and his daughter, who was a middle school teacher in Seattle, went with him. And it impacted them quite powerfully too, which, I wish, I've told him this, but he takes compliments super well. He doesn't at all take compliments well. But I just admired so much because Terry has been teaching for decades and has done really innovative work in curriculum design and projects in Montana and still saw great value in this and saw a need to continue to shift his practice. And I just think that's admirable. We all talk about that's one of the strengths of teachers who've been teaching a long time is to still take in new information. That's not always easy to do. And change is such hard work. So Terry came back, we said, yes, we want to do this. We redesigned, at the time he and I were teaching 93, 94, 98, we redesigned all three of those courses around this work, and we got a little bit of release time. We had some grant that Pete was doing, I don't remember what it was, and they got us a little release time so we could be in each other's classrooms and design this stuff. And it was awesome, but it was really hard. As part of that, because we had a little bit to work with, we brought Ruth in to come to our classes and give us feedback. Again, very aware, okay, I'm probably seeking validation here, so I'm going to try to not do that. We were past that a little bit. And this is sort of what we found. Change is hard because people overestimate the value of what they have and underestimate the value of what they may gain by giving that up. And the reason I chose this is because that's a conversation Ruth and I had once. So when she came in, we had just collected a menu. So there are these tasks that students have done. And we were all sitting around. We were feeling pretty good about what we were doing because we worked really hard redesigning the courses. And Ruth said she didn't say it this way, but this is how I remember it in my head, is that she said, well, we've got a problem here. But she said she didn't say that, but I'm really pretty sure. And we said, what? And she said, all the menus look exactly the same. And we hadn't noticed that, but we had really, and if we were really setting up our classroom where students were bringing their own thinking and exploring, especially these tasks, that wouldn't be the case. There's no way a room of 30 people are all going to do the task exactly the same way, if we're really letting them bring their thinking to the table. And menu's the one place that should definitely happen. So Terry and I reflected on that a lot and came to the conclusion that as hard as we had tried to recreate the environment that was set up in that course, what we did was recreate our own experience with the course. So Terry had a way he liked to do pattern tasks. I had a way I liked to do pattern tasks. We set things up so all of our students did it the way we did it, which is not the point. So it was that was like the first kind of head against the wall realization that this was going to be really hard. even though I wanted to do it so badly. Because, and I think this last one was a big part, for me at least, and Ruth told me this, she said, you're struggling to let go of things that I think once you let go of them, you'll wonder why you hung on to them so tightly. And for me, those were the things that had always convinced me I was a good teacher, or people had told me made me a good teacher. Like, I'm really good at explaining things and multiple ways, or I'm really good at scaffolding. I want to get a t-shirt that says I'm a recovering over scaffolder, because I'm really good at taking a complex problem and breaking it into a bunch of steps that are easy for people to go through. And that's lovely if the goal is to get people through things easily. It's not lovely if the goal is to help people be better problem solvers. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But I had a hard time, and I still have a hard time giving some of those things up, because they were so much a part of what had made me a good teacher up to that point. You know, designing a lesson that walks them down this beautiful path through content, which is what I was really good at doing, I think, is very different than setting up a unit where you identify what the big ideas are that are hard and icky and cause confusion, and we know what they do, and they're not intuitive. How do we set up a unit where students run up against those ideas over and over and over and over again so that they realize this is a huge idea and it's messy? And I got that part, and I didn't get that part. He seems to understand that part. She seems to understand that part. What's going on here? That's the goal of this work. And it's totally different. And I thought I would change faster. And I didn't. This also is not easy for me. That change is a process and not an event. I wanted to come back and say, I did it. I wanted to make this change. I want this to happen in my classroom. And I still couldn't say that. It's just always a process. And then new information comes in, and we're taking that in and making that a part of the process. All right. So come back to school. We've had these experiences. Terry and I are doing this work. And then it is what I would call Initiative Palooza, which is just, there's a lot of initiatives going on, right? There's always a project. There's always something. So the question kind of becomes, how do I take this new lens and how do we bring this to the conversation? Does it influence other things we're doing? And I'm just sharing here a few of my favorites that I've been involved in over the last few years. There are many others, and I'm sure I'm forgetting a bunch. But we had the Transitions Math Project when I first came here. That's our state board. I probably don't have to over-explain that because of the audience, but you know, we have a lot of active work from our state board in terms of trying to improve communication and just keep it healthy in terms of math across the grades. College readiness standards came out of that. That was prior to the Common Core, which is more commonly used now. But college readiness standards were a good conversation for us about what does it mean to be college ready for math. So we're now having this conversation, another project that I think is super interesting. What's the difference between college level and college ready? I think that's sort of interesting to think about. So anyway, we've had those. RAMP, I think Jess, you were involved in RAMP maybe?
No, that was before.
That was pre-U, so several of us were involved in RAMP. That was a co-sector project, but all math, so it was high school, community college, and university in groups designing lessons together. Kind of a lesson study-ish thing. Did you ever do RAMP, Jeremy? No, Chris? Yeah, I mean, and what I notice about RAMP is people still talk about it. I think they met each other. It like brought in a new generation of people who were too late for the transition math project. So anyway, I hear still people talking about that. Rethinking pre-college math was a state board thing that our department was involved in. That came at the end. We had already done a lot of our redesign through the title, whatever title grant we had. 2, 3, I don't remember which title it was, but we had Title 9? No, that's girls. Anyway, and this came at the end, and it was really about different colleges doing different things in terms of reformatting their pre-college math. So this is when a lot of the non-STEM track Dev Ed classes started to come in, and that was that work. AMATIC Project Access, several of us have taken part in that. That AMATIC is our national professional organization, and this is a mentoring project. So I was a part of that, and I know Greg, Jessica, Terry, I don't remember, lots of people have done that. That's been super influential and interesting in terms of getting a sense of what's happening across the country with two-year colleges in mathematics. And usually we come back feeling like, oh, we're doing quite a lot. We're kind of got good stuff going on here. The MEC MSP I'm going to talk about in a little bit more detail in a few minutes. That was a 3-year project that was through this organization that Terry and Greg and I were a part of, and then when Terry left, Jessica filled his spot. So there were 4 of us that participated in that. Successful Transitions to College is one that just wrapped up, and that was a co-sector, co-curricular model. So we were, Jess and Chris were a part of this, and Pete and I were as well. And so those were, again, teams of high school, community college, college. This time, rather than designing lessons, it was about identifying a shared problem of practice within the classroom and doing research. And it was, and coming up with an intervention and testing it out. And it was more based on really trying to do the whole inquiry cycle and really close the loop. Like, not just try it, but somehow see if you think it works and then try it again. I think we do really well at try it. And then closing that inquiry loop is sometimes tough. That's been my experience. Bridge to College Math, that's another statewide project that I'm a part of currently. If you're not familiar with those courses, these are statewide, math and English both have them, Bridge to College, a course that has been designed collaboratively between college and high school teachers, and then it's being implemented across the state. This is essentially like a senior level math class for a student who scores a 2 on the SBAC, which is not meeting standard on the Smarter Balanced Assessment. Then if they take this, if they have a 2, take this course and get a B, we will place them into a college level course, like 107 or stats is usually what they are. So it's kind of an alternative to testing. So, and there are a lot of interesting goals to this project. I'm a course trainer for this project, so I support, I'm supporting 3 teams right now. Next year I'll support 2 ESDs, I think, or 3 ESDs, because we have to kind of spread out a little bit more next year because we don't have as much funding. But the goal here is to create a good curriculum that tries to require or encourage really good pedagogy, but then also match it with professional development. Because curriculum doesn't change things, but we also need good curriculum to do good teaching, so there's this kind of funny balance. That's been a really interesting project. So MEC's work is more about, let's get this experience and have a vision of what we can do. This was more about, let's create this good curriculum that we can get out there kind of widely and fairly quickly, but support teachers in using it. So there are just different approaches to how we influence classrooms. And then finally, the Gen Ed assessment work here at the Falls. I've been a part of that, and I think it's interesting. I think there's power in it, depending on how we embrace the process, in terms of thinking about the work we have students do in a bigger way, in terms of, like, what are the big ideas here? And those rubrics help a little bit with that. But this is always the question that comes back to me. So we've got initiatives coming out our ears. And those are my favorites. So, I mean, there's just a lot of good work happening. But what impact is this having on my classroom? Is always the question I come back to. Is this really impacting my classroom? Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. Very often, for me, it doesn't impact my classroom as much as probably was hoped by whoever was doing it. But the MEC work was different for me, and that's why I was so drawn to it. It completely changed my practice. So I just wanted to know more about it. So throughout those years, so that was 2009, so for the next 3 years, I just kept in contact with them, and if they had a project that I could be a part of, I raised my hand for it. And in 2012, they got a math science partnership grant through the state called Preparing the Next Generation of Mathematics Teacher Leaders for Washington State. Also, we are not good at short titles at MEC, so I'm just carrying on the tradition. And so this was a project that began again in 2012. It was a 3-year project. This is the one that Terry and Greg and I started on, and Jessica joined when Terry left. It was right when she was hired. They were based around summer content workshops, similar to the course I had took, but shorter. These were 4-day workshops with 2 days of leadership following. But again, the focus on the 4 days is teachers as learners, really in the classroom as learners. Then we had school year webinars to touch base, share what we were trying, what we were struggling with, how things were going. And then we had studio days, which many of you might have participated in. This is when we would have people come into our classrooms and we'd reflect on what our goals were for the day and have them come in and watch and then go back and kind of debrief. And Ruth and Patty would come and facilitate those. Really incredible model for sharing classroom practice. I think one of the most powerful pieces of this project. It was based on the idea that we had time to put this stuff to work in our classroom before we were asked to take leadership roles. That was really important. So when you say it's a leadership project, there's a tendency to want to put people out there right away. Like, okay, now you're a leader, go out and talk to people. But the reality is, many of us were, really early in the process of trying to put it to work in the classroom. So the goal was, we give these teachers at least 2 years, maybe even all 3, to do this hard work. And it's not like it would be complete, but you come in with a different understanding of the work when you've tried it that long and, in a community. And then we were prepared to facilitate those 4-day workshops through the professional development. So I've done a few here in Spokane. There are quite a few happening in Olympia, Pasco, different groups. So people who are part of this project are now kind of certified. That's not quite the right, it's not that official, but to facilitate this PD out in their communities. So to bring these content workshops to more teachers. PD? Professional development. So we did, the content was ratios and proportional reasoning, rational numbers, and expressions and equations. So they were big strands from the Common Core. And they ran, those run through all grades. And so, again, we were in groups of mostly 4th grade through higher ed for this, not quite as much K through 3. Okay, so in terms of, those of us in it were really excited about the project. But in the end, you still have this question of, does it have any impact? And the tool that they used to measure classroom impact was called RTOP, so it's the Reformed Teacher Observation Protocol. And it's a cool protocol. It requires somebody to come sit in the classroom and observe, and they rate. You have to do norming and stuff, and then once you know how to score it, they come in and watch the classroom. And it's things like, so RTOP is based on educational research, evidence-based practices, things you can see in the classroom that are highly correlated with successful, all of these things that we look for, these rich learning environments. So the one that always popped up for me that was always, I was working on, was letting student thinking guide conversations. I still want to go in and control conversations. There were a lot of different indicators like that. So RTOP had a whole bunch, and we saw really powerful growth across the whole project in terms of how classroom practice changed, which is really exciting because it matched their perception. We've talked about it's hard when you try to measure something and what comes out doesn't match your perception of what happened in class, but it's exciting when it does. We were all feeling this happening, and then the results played out. And then the other main indicator was the SBAC scores, so that's the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium, which is our standardized test in Washington. And, standardized tests only tell so much. So this was one indicator, but it was an important one, especially in the climate today. These are students of teachers who participated in the project, and then these are students in the comparison group, so teachers who didn't participate. And we had a researcher do this who knew how to find the right comparison groups. It wasn't us. And our participant group students, 60% of them met standard as opposed to 38 in the comparison, which is pretty exciting too, because it's not that direct. It's not like all teachers were out doing exactly the same thing. We weren't handed a curriculum. It was this experience of teaching and then bringing it back to your classroom in various ways. Hard to get your hands around. Okay, so we saw shifts in practice project-wide. That's great. Increased student achievement project-wide, also great. Increased teacher content knowledge. That was the other thing we did pre and post to see how teachers' content knowledge changed, and there were great increases there as well, which we know is important and often kind of pushed to the side in professional development. And I felt promising, I was feeling good about what's happening in my classroom. Not perfect, but feeling good, like I'm making some progress. Then this question just kept getting me though. Well, how was I doing at helpfully engaging with teachers who wanted to do this work? So it was not uncommon, we do a studio day, teachers would come in and say, I love what's happening in here. How do I do it? What do I do? And I really didn't know how to engage in that because it's a process, right? So the most I could say is go to one of these workshops that may or may not be available. And I mean, you guys have been a part of those conversations with me. Like, I don't know how to best engage. And we're not always even excited about the same things. So you might be over here and I'm over here. And I just realized very quickly that I didn't really know how to engage with kind of a wide range of teachers in their positions. So I had a huge question mark there, and it became glaringly obvious that I didn't know, and I kind of wanted to learn how to do that. That was felt like a worthy challenge. So in the fall of 2015, I applied for sabbatical. I applied for a year and got a quarter, which is not uncommon, I tell myself. So I called MEC and said, listen, I have a quarter of sabbatical. I'd like to learn from you, whatever way I can. What can I learn? And they were actually, after the MSP project, thinking of closing down because they're both kind of close to retirement age. Ruth and Patty are the co-founders of MEC. And, but the project went so well and the results were so strong and there were a lot of people interested in the work that's still kind of this, well, maybe we'll figure out some way to keep the work going. So their administrative director had just retired. So I stepped in as the administrative director, which was actually kind of a great way to get to know the organization because I'm taking all the calls, I'm doing the contracts, because we still do workshops that people just hire us to do, Number Talk Institutes and those content workshops, mostly Number Talk Institutes right now, which we'll talk about a little bit. So I stepped in to do that, and it was a great way to get to know. It's a small group. There's only like 6 of us, but in the whole organization. But you know, they've been together for 20 years, so there was a lot to learn there in terms of how things worked. And then I also was an instructor whenever I could be. That's the work I'm most interested in. So I co-facilitated Number Talk Institutes and also some really cool content workshops. Patty and I did a 9-day course in Kelso last summer with middle school students and their teachers together taking the course, and it was amazing. I also learned how to create a website, which I've never done before, and manage it, kind of. So you can check that out if you want. I'll write it up here. And since I was home, I homeschooled my kids in math, which was a whole new adventure that could be a whole nother talk. But what it did was incredible so I've taught college, I've taught high school. I have a son in middle school and a daughter in elementary. So it really helped. I mean, I had to dig into the standards. I had to choose curriculum. I had to think about what this was going to look like. And it helped me get this broad view in a way I didn't have before. Even working with the teachers, you know, it's not the same as when you're kind of digging into it yourself. So that was a pretty incredible experience too. Then from that point until now, so this has been about a 2-year span, it's been a combination of some unpaid leave, but a lot of contract buyout. So MEC was able to buy out my contract so that it wasn't costing the school, but to give me the time to try to get my feet under me in this work. So the 2 years have been a lot about how do I blend these two things together? Because I see tons of overlap, but in a Venn diagram, I don't feel like there might be a small group of us feeling that overlap. I'm not totally sure. And also, it's just so new to me that I'm trying to get my feet under me and think about how does this apply elsewhere, and that's been tough sometimes. So we did some grant proposals to try to continue the work, something bigger than the workshops we were doing. We applied for another MSP. We kind of were a little late on that one, didn't get it. We applied for an NSF DR K-12 grant, didn't get it. That was a lot of work. Then in this year, we applied for a College Spark Washington grant, and we did get that one. We just found out in May 1st. During that time, I was still on all my committees here at school, so those of you that we are on committees together, you saw me at those. And then I continued with several projects. The Bridge to College, again, I was a course trainer, still am a course trainer for that project. The Successful Transitions to College, I was on the leadership team for that. We just wrapped that one up with a capstone event. And then now we're just beginning a new project. This is a CCS, Rural College and Career Readiness. It's kind of built on this one with the cross-sector cohorts, but it includes counselors. And it's about us being more in touch with the needs of our rural students and the transition they make, which is different than the transition that some of our more urban students make. That's been fascinating. And again, feeling like that really the whole time. Like this is a different place. I don't really know. This isn't a conventional way to look at this position. So try to look and enjoy the view, but mostly worried I was just gonna fall and kill myself. So the College Spark grant that we got that we're embarking on now is called Transforming Classrooms Through a Number Talks, a Leadership Academy. I like to call it the Number Talks Leadership Academy, but it's a little short for some likings, but that's what I call it. But the idea is to use Number Talks as a vehicle for change. So some of you are familiar with Number Talks, but I'll just explain it briefly anyway. It's an instructional routine. It's a common term used now that I think it would fit. It's a 10 to 15 minute routine. We recommend that it's used pretty regularly, otherwise it's hard for students to build on each other's ideas. It's kind of elegantly simple, but also really easy to do in a way that isn't productive. So it's based on mental math in a lot of ways, about putting a task and letting students wrestle with it mentally. And then it's really about students sharing their thinking as many different ways as they can. And our job as the teacher is only to record it, not to judge it, not to correct it, not to guide it, not to poo-poo it. It's to record it, get as many ideas out as possible. And then there are a lot of kind of things around that. They lead beautifully into different investigations about big ideas that they see. Will that always happen? I wonder if Jeremy's strategy would always work. That could move into a different part of class. It seems like this really simple thing, but what we have found, because Number Talks have been a part of all of the courses up to this point, Ruth and another colleague, Kathy Richardson, developed Number Talks in the 90s because they just felt it was a need in their class. And the goal is really to foster number sense, because we unfortunately often convince students to abandon the own sense making that they have and do things using certain algorithms. And not that algorithms are bad, but what research tells us is that we introduce them way too quickly. And if we do them too soon, students don't go back. They're not interested in figuring out why it worked. We need lots of time to mess around and then develop, and then maybe decide we like one is more efficient. But efficiency, we are finding, also kind of lies in the mind of the beholder. So they're really about pushing back on some of those big ideas. But what we notice in classrooms and what teachers tell us and have experienced ourselves is that they can be a real vehicle for change, because once you create this little space where students can share their thinking, you want to see more of that as a teacher. Once you hear their ideas and hear what they can do, you can't pretend they don't know that and can't do that anymore. So it starts to change, and we're interested in looking at that. Like, what is it? Because the courses and the workshops are great, but you can leave feeling pretty overwhelmed, as most of us did, thinking, I don't know how to change my whole class. This is a lot. Number Talks seem to be a very high leverage activity that then get us in the place where we can start talking about some of those other changes, and they're not quite so terrifying. So we're looking at using Number Talks as a vehicle for change. It's going to be 3 years again. We're basing it somewhat on the MEC MSP. That was just also the maximum length for this project. So we're starting this summer. We'll be working with, we've had 180 K-14 teachers put in letters of commitment, so they're registering right now. So cross your fingers that we'll get everybody registered. Statewide, so we'll have 4 sites: Spokane, Pasco, Seattle, and Olympia. We'll be doing academies this summer. And it'll be somewhat based on the MEC MSP in that it'll be content. So we'll do 2 days of content work and then 2 days of leadership work, and then we'll have webinars through. So it's a bit shorter. We didn't have as much budget, and we can't do studio days because we don't have the budget for it. But that might be good. This is a lot bigger group than the last project, so I don't know how we would be in that many places anyway. And then they'll also have collaborating teachers and coaches. So again, it's a leadership project. So the goal is that these 100 people become potential leaders in the work. So what we find when people bring them, Number Talks are very popular right now in K-12. They'll bring them in, and teachers say, great, yes, because they seem so easy to do, But there's so much potential for growth that doesn't get tapped because we're all kind of interested, but then what do we do next? Like, well, that was fun, but I kind of want to stretch it or move into these other steps. And so the work with these teachers will be having that conversation together and then producing 2-hour professional development sessions that they can take with them to then use out in their places to say, okay, so we've done them, we're excited, what could we do next with these? How could we dig deeper, have them make a bigger impact, not just kind of one more thing we do once a week or whatever. And again, the idea is to empower and foster leadership over time. So we're not expecting these leaders to work as mentors until year 2 at the very, very earliest. It's really going to depend on kind of what's happening in their district and where they are with their own practice. But we found in the MSP that those of us who participated, the idea of knowing that we would be expected to take some kind of leadership role really changed the way we engaged with the work. And we couldn't, that's hard to measure, but we felt it. We talked about it a lot. There was something more urgent about it. So, and we need these networks of people around the state that kind of have a sense of what's happening and stay connected so that we can grow together. So what I've learned through this process, scratch that, what I'm thinking about right now. And there's a reason for that. There's a real common practice right now in K-12 where maybe administrators or someone else is asking, or they're asking teachers to put their objective for the day on the board. And we, along with a lot of teachers, push back on that because even when we're all doing the same lesson at the same time, all students don't interact with it exactly the same way. And so the idea is an administrator can come in and say, what are you learning today? And the student will say, I'm learning how to factor a quadratic. But that's not probably really the math that's happening there. They're probably looking at the board and reading it, or, I don't remember who it was who said, a more interesting question, a mathematician said, a more interesting question to ask is to sit down with a student and say, what are you trying to figure out right now? And because even if they're all interacting around a similar objective, the way they're going about it, hopefully, is not exactly the same. And so we really want to know, what are you just trying to figure out right now? I'm trying to figure out how to make these numbers work, or I'm trying to figure out what this picture would look like, or whatever. So I decided instead of what I've learned, I'm just going to share what I'm thinking about. There is so much great work happening and so little time and energy. This is just on my part. There's so much great work out there, and I've got this limited source of what I can do. Classroom practice still feels central to me. That's still what drives me in terms of, I think that's our greatest sphere of influence, is what we do in the classroom. And I think it feeds us, so it's important to not lose track of that. Curriculum matters. I hate it. I'm on a curriculum committee right now. I'll go there tonight. I'm so glad to be a part of it, but it's my least favorite thing about teaching because it's never good enough. But I know that good curriculum matters. The problem that I'm coming up against is that curriculum that might be accessible to everyone might be really limited in terms of being able to be innovative with it. And so I think the curriculum question's a really interesting one that I have trouble wrapping my head around. But I'm glad other people are thinking about it who find it super interesting. Assessment matters. How do we assess learning? I mean, that's a whole other field all by itself. Course sequences. We know we can affect students. We've seen it by changing our course sequences. There's lots of work happening around the country, and that Dana Center is doing a ton of work around that, right? We know that makes a difference. I know it's important, and I know it's connected to other things I care about. Placement, we all know that makes a big difference in terms of enrollment. Policy, national policy, state policy. That's important. Working with administrators so that they understand if the things they're doing are really helping in the classroom or maybe actually making it harder for teachers to do their job. That's not easy to tell as an administrator. There's important work to be done there. Working with the community, reaching out to communities, helping them understand why math class might look different than it did when they were in school, why that's important. Societal attitudes towards math. I saw a presentation by the Dana Center recently that they're really working on the national level too to try to change the conversation. Like, you kind of have to decide where do you want to put your energy, and they're kind of trying to do this broad, which I think is great, to really catch people up on what's going on with math education. And then of course equity. Are we doing this in ways that make it really equitably accessible to all people? Because sometimes something that will solve a little problem here makes it really inaccessible to somebody else. For me, classroom practice still it's still where I'm most interested in. But trying to figure out how that plays with all of these things is really interesting and overwhelming to me. So I'm trying to kind of think, where do I want to focus? Here are some other things I'm thinking about. Leading from the classroom. So I love the idea of leading from the classroom, meaning I teach, and then I try to go out and say, be a part of these projects. And by leading, I don't mean like have all the answers. I mean just being willing to say, let's do this, like organize this conversation. Let's talk about this and see what we can do. So we talk about the power of leading from the classroom because, you know, we can be working in a workshop and I can say, oh, I just tried that the other day in my class. Here's how it worked. And it feels really good. It feels really authentic. But there's this really critical balance too. So on one hand, there's a great deal of comfort, and I feel like credibility when I'm in the classroom while I'm doing the work. It feels really comfortable. But there's this other side that I struggle with, which is being focused enough to be productive. So these are two different headspaces for me, being in the classroom as a teacher, doing professional development. And I think they'll feel more interconnected the more I do the second one, but right now it's a big gear shift to go from one to the other. So there's like this question of, can you do both, or how do you do both and do it well? The other thing I think about a lot are structural supports for this kind of work. I love that teachers are being valued as leaders in their own field. I think that's really important because I think we're the right people to do it. But do our structures really support it? And this kind of work happens in so many different ways. And I just mean, it's not even just what MEC does, but anything where we're saying there's an important conversation to be had here. How do we create space to have it? Who's going to lead it? Where is it going to go to? How does it connect to all these other things we're doing? Sometimes, and I think probably most often, it's seen as an add-on. So that's great. If you're interested in that, we'll add that on to the work that you're already doing, which certainly can be a struggle. Sometimes, depending, and this varies place to place, sometimes it's valued enough to be a replacement for some of the other loads. So whether it's part of your teaching load or something else, like this is valuable enough, we want you to have time to go do it and not just add it on to your other duties. Of course, you know, we can all imagine the complications there. The other piece I find myself thinking about is how do we identify and communicate what value is added through these types of projects? So we all know some of them have been very meaningful to us and some of them haven't, but when you have to go out and advocate for it, I have a hard time at least kind of pinpointing some of the stuff that I think is added through us doing this work is not always easily measurable. And I don't know, I think there's room for improvement in most places about how to communicate that value added, to say, these things are happening and what are we going to do with it to really clarify what we're learning and what we're getting from that work. And then the idea of, and I think this changes just depending on who's in what positions, but having some kind of vision or big picture understanding of all the work that's happening and helping us leverage that together. So to notice, you're really interested in this and this project, you're really interested, oh, those actually have some things in common. Let's see if we can, in our next step, do something where we're using what you both learned and moving forward faster or more effectively. It's all very nebulous, at least from my perspective, and it kind of just depends, like you get lucky and talk to somebody somewhere, and suddenly you're thinking, oh, that sounds just like what I'm doing. And that's great, but it feels like there's potential and growing. I think I see this changing too. Conversations about being more aware of that. Our state board and our OSPI, I think, are actually really quite good at this, like keeping an eye on things and trying to connect us. But I think as institutions, we could think about this too. I know in some of my projects, talking with folks in English and at both of our campuses, there's great work, similar work happening that I never knew about, that I think, oh, gosh, it would have been great to do that together. K-12 has some of these structures in place. They have instructional coaches, so those are, or TOSAs, teachers on special assignment, where they're teachers, but they're out of the classroom doing work to support other teachers in improving practice or whatever the goals are. They have math fellows across the state, so these are it's a kind of a leadership development program, and they do some special professional development together. Sometimes they bring it back. The challenge there is they tend to be the people who get tapped all the time. So in all of these positions, that happens where you've got the people that tend to say yes to this kind of work and they're totally strung out because they're doing so much. We have regional math coordinators in our state, which a lot of states don't have. So our state is broken into, I think, 9 ESDs, Educational Service Districts. Ours is ESD 101. Ours is pretty big because we're a little bit rural. And each of those has a regional math coordinator, which is huge for our state because those are the people, like if you need to get word out about something that's happening in math, those are the people you go to. Many states don't have that structure. Or if the state says, you know, like when the Common Core came down, they said, we need to develop something to help teachers learn about this. They do it through the regional math coordinators. So you've got 9 people who then go out across the state, and that's their job, is to say, let's do this work together. So those kinds of structures, I think, can be helpful just in my limited experience. Boy, my fonts were a lot cooler on my computer, but that's okay. But I still wonder, do our structures really place real value on teachers and innovators and leaders? I feel like it depends. It depends on the place. It depends on the kind of what's going on. Money-wise, it often really depends on budget. Some places do more than others, but I mean, you know, a lot of us in this room do this work too, and have done it times. And this is how I feel most of us feel about it often. I feel really fortunate that me doing this work, I feel like it's been as supportive as I could have expected it to be, and I'm really thankful for that. But in terms of sustainability, it still feels like they're kind of these special side projects, and it's hard to bring them into the fold and say, no, this is valuable enough for people to really be spending time on it. And I don't know the answers. I mean, it's so based on things outside of my realm of knowing. But I think it's worth thinking about. So big ideas right now that have my attention, I just want to share it with you. Cross-curricular commonality. So after being involved in these projects, I am just always struck by how much we have in common with other disciplines that I think we don't recognize, or I didn't recognize all that often. English especially. I've been doing a lot of projects with English, and I think we tend to think, oh, that's the math people and the English people. And one of my colleagues said, I think you're kind of secretly an English person, because I love getting like down in the weeds. We bring up some weird thing, but what I always expect, even where I think there are going to be differences, there's huge commonality. We were sharing at a thing recently, and I said, there's this danger in math of things getting broken down into such small pieces that they're not connected. We can break content down so small that nothing feels connected. And Bradley Blackhair in English said afterwards, that happens in English too, exactly the same thing. You can break it down so tiny that you're not doing the work of of English anymore. You're doing this other thing. My words, not his. And so I think those commonalities are powerful, because what the work with MEC has helped me see is that I think our discipline can be as flexible and rich in the classroom as some of these other disciplines. But I think for me it requires big change. Not for everybody. Some people are already having that happen. For me, it was a shift, and it still is. But to look at content in this kind of more beautiful way, instead of just feeling like, I got to get through these 80 things by the end of the quarter. And still meet our, it has to do with how we identify objectives and everything. But I think the commonalities are potentially more powerful than I've given them credit for. I think a lot about differentiation and what that means. So the idea that you have different levels of students in different places in class, which every class needs differentiation, even if it's the most heterogeneous looking class, they all came from the same place, whatever. From the last prereq or something, they're still different. They're not learning the same stuff at the same time. But what I'm noticing is this gets used in so many different ways, and that feels important to me. So to me, the most powerful tool for differentiation has been that menu time, where students are allowed to work in different places, and I can go around and just really fuss with seeing where people are and deciding what's the next best question for them, and then bring them all together so we're still having these common experiences. For others, it means, more of like the computer programs where they're sitting and working on whatever, they're working through modules and they are wherever they are and they're all in different places. That can mean differentiation. So there are a lot of different things that can mean and different ways that differentiation is pictured, and that feels important and interesting to me, because I'm not sure I think technology is often a go-to quicker to differentiation than I would like sometimes, because I think we can do more in the classroom. And technology can be a hugely powerful piece of that. But I don't think it's going to fix our problems by itself. I don't think most people do. But you might be, we've all heard those talks too, mostly somebody selling something. For what it means to participate, and I threw on neurodiversity here because this is another interest I have, but what does it mean to participate in class? So as we talk about equity a lot and whether or not our classes are equitable, what we often look at, or what I hear people looking at, is who's participating. And if you have people that aren't participating, that's problematic, and there are some routines you can do to make sure everybody participates. And I worry about that because I think that in some ways that could be less equitable than what we're doing now. Because in the neurodiversity piece, this is like autism, ADHD, other less typical neurologies, participation can look really different. So for instance, or even introverts, I was just getting started reading the book Quiet recently, and the idea that it might make me happy as a teacher to come and see a group of students working and all 4 people have to say something. Great, everybody has participated. The important thing is, from some of those students, that being forced to talk could be exactly what shut down their thinking for the day, because that's such a stressful situation that it would be much healthier for that person to sit back, conversation you and I were having, to sit back and listen to that group and maybe write a reflection. If I really want to know, did you get something out of it? Maybe I do a quick written reflection so I can just check and make sure they were engaged. So I think a lot about engagement and participation, and I worry that we're looking at it maybe too narrowly at a time when we're being really creative and innovative. I feel like there's room to widen that a little bit. But that's just personal, because neurodiversity lives in my family, and it's important to me that that's valued. So that one always bubbles up. Grain size is the other. The idea here is, this comes from Phil Darrow, who is a principal writer of the Common Core State Standards in math. A really interesting guy and very thoughtful. And he talks about lessons being too small of a grain size. So if we're thinking about like making change or doing things, that lessons are a little bit too small, and it's kind of the same idea as the objectives on the board. If we say, these are the 3 things that are going to happen in this lesson, we're probably not being very realistic, because we have an hour or whatever, maybe an hour and a half, 45 minutes. And not all students are going to interact with the content in that little bit of time. And I call it, I think I stole it from Ruth, I stole it from somebody, and I'm pretty good at this. I often create an illusion of learning. So kind of the marching through and everybody's in the same place, but I know really, like let's say they do an exit ticket, which I don't do, but lots of people do, and everybody got the right answer. The reality is, though, that even when all the work looks the same, people didn't engage with it the same way, and we kind of force that sometimes. Like, we make the marker the lesson, and Phil Darrow recommends making the marker the unit. So looking at units of study. So you have objectives for the unit, and you have things that you want to happen through the unit, but you recognize they may not happen this day, that day, but you're kind of keeping track of that. So I think about grain size, and I know we think together a lot about looking at designing units of study together as opposed to lessons, potentially, because that feels very different. Okay, here are a few things I'm sure of, which is rare. Teachers of all grades are amazing. So working with teachers across the grades, I really expected to just get a big wave of frustration, because I think this is a pretty crummy environment to be teaching in right now nationally. They are under so much scrutiny, so many different measures, so much pressure. And this has been going on for a while, and now recently it's shifted even further. And what I see all the time is teachers who just come in with incredible energy and desire to continually get better, even though they are already masters of their craft in so many ways. And it's truly incredible. Community colleges and the missions that we have are essential. And I've always loved working at the community college, because the mission aligns so well with what I believe about learning, which is we need to give everybody the chance. And I think we need to give everyone the chance at higher education. I think it's more important than ever because of the pressures that are being felt elsewhere. There are kids who just aren't getting served well, and we have the chance to get them and give them a chance at higher ed. And I think that's so important. even with all the great work happening, we still, there's still a lot who need us. Well, they need us anyway, because we're great. Washington math community is really strong. So again, I've mentioned the State Board and OSPI, which is our K-12 group. They work beautifully together, and in talking with folks in other states, we have a really active and involved state groups that really ask for our input and ask for teachers to lead work, which I think is incredible. Spokane math community is really robust. I'm realizing now, doing work across the state, we have some really unique stuff happening in Spokane, and I think part of it is our semi-isolation, that we kind of, Spokane math community knows each other pretty well, and it's true to Spokane in every other way. We don't shift fast, but when we do, it's pretty solid. Like, and the I-5 corridor, it's so hard to keep up over there because, like if one community college does something, they have to please a lot of universities, and they have students jumping around all over the place, and it's just different. I think we have opportunities to affect change in our area in a unique way compared to other parts of the state or country, and I see that often in talking with folks, so I think it's exciting. SFCC is special. This is just an awesome place for lots of reasons that you all know, so I won't even go into it, but it might be good to be reminded of that sometimes, because it's also a place of work and it gets frustrating. But I think, especially in work that that we all do together across the campus, we work as hard as anyone to keep students at the core of the work that we do, and what's best for the students. And that can be easy to lose track of, especially in kind of tough times. And I think our school does that well. I hear that. And then on the math department, which is an incredible math department. But I'll tell you what I like, since it's all you guys, what I like about all of you. I think something really important that we have done, as long as I've seen or been here, is we are willing to jump out and be a part of the tough conversations when they are just starting. And that's so important, because then we help to form and lead the conversation as opposed to follow behind and have to conform to whatever is happening. And I think it's easy to lose track of as we sit here. I know I lose track of it, but we are still seen that way in the state as that department that does those things. It's willing to be innovative and willing to get involved and willing to have the tough conversations and contribute to them. And I'm really proud to have been a part of it. Okay, so unfortunately, my path doesn't look like this. I was hoping that at the end of 2 years, there would be this clear arrow. Green would be great, any color would be great. It would say, this is what makes most sense. And the 2 years for me, I've been hoping to try to blend the two, but for 1,000 different reasons, as you all know, because I sent that email out, I don't know if Ken knows, but I have not, the path for how to blend the two has not become clear to me. And I looked, we've dug in the bushes, we went to the neighbor's house and asked them for ideas. But at this point, I just can't see a way to do both of them. So that's why I'm leaving my full-time position. I don't know if I told you that, Ken. Yeah, next year. But I am very, very hopeful that it is not the end of my work with Spokane Falls. I just hope that it might just have to change a little bit. But this is an incredible place to teach and to talk about teaching and to think about serving students, and I want to still be a part of it. I'm just not sure what that will look like yet, but I'm so pleased to have been a part of it for this long. And so I'll just end with this quote that I got from a really cool card at Trader Joe's. But I think about it when I'm really feeling nervous. One doesn't discover new lands without consenting to lose sight of the shore. So the falls is kind of my shore. It's kind of my safe place. And so, but in the last 2 years, I've had to lose sight of it a little bit to get a sense of where this work might go. But my hope is that in seeing that, what I bring back in whatever way I can bring it back is richer because of having lost sight a little bit. So that's what I'm hoping to do. That's what the last 2 years have been about. Fairly nonlinear, I think. So that's it. I don't know. Any questions or? I think I'm right on time. Did I go over? Okay. You guys have all talked to me about this quite a bit, so it's a little bit preaching to the choir. But do you have anything? Any questions? Any ideas? Do you want to tell me what to do? That'd be sweet. I've been looking for someone to solve this puzzle for me for 2 years, so if you're in the room, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, thanks, guys.